The history of the black model specific to fashion is actually the history of the black person in the United States. That change happens first in fashion before it spreads into the general public. The black model is the Valkyrie. She sets the standard. She's the forebearer. She's the person that gets that message out first.
Fashion is always changing and evolving, and you know, I've found through it that the only thing you really can do is do what honestly feels good to you. We did this really special show in Paris. Came up as an opportunity with Tommy Hilfiger. He had done collaborations before, and he just said, listen, I like supporting young people and young talent, and I think that you're special, and I would love to give you kind of my platform to kind of create what you want. You know, immediately when you think of Tommy Hilfiger, you think of the 90s and hip hop, but we kind of wanted to tap into something else, which was where Tommy Hilfiger started, which was like back in the 70s. So then it just kind of became about massive influence from like black glamour in the 70s. It was so fun for us. I mean, we just got to like, I don't know, I got to create the clothes that I see pictures of my grandma wearing from the 70s. She's one of the most glamorous women I know. And I just was like, that's her, that's the inspiration.
We had the most legendary women walk, Beverly Johnson and Pat Cleveland.
So not only did she use models of every age, she used models of every shape, every size. And it was a celebration of blackness. And every hue, from lightest alabaster to darkest onyx, was on that runway. It was a moment.
Our closing act was Grace Jones, which was like insane. She tore the house down. She came out there and everybody was on their feet. I've never seen a fashion show where people were on their feet. And it was amazing. Yeah, it's a moment I'll never forget.
Anytime you see a designer use a lot of black female models, it takes you automatically back to the Battle of Versailles.
The 1973 Battle of Versailles just goes down as one of the iconic fashion moments.
If we want to talk about what black women brings to fashion, and in particular the runway, we have to go back to the Battle of Versailles. These black models brought oomph and style and excitement. This group of black women changed the way that clothes were presented, and it became more of what we see on the runways today.
The 17th century Palace of Versailles in Paris apparently has fallen victim to termites, worms, and leaks. And those who want to save it say $60 million is needed. So last night, a lavish fundraising party and fashion show was held at the palace for 650 invited guests.
It was the vision of Eleanor Lambert and Francois de la Renta, who was a wife of Oscar de la Renta at the time. So it became an idea of just really basically bringing 5 American designers: Stephen Burrows, Oscar de la Renta, Bill Blass, Anne Klein, and Paulson. And then all of a sudden, the French started saying things like in their press, American designers coming to Paris to show what? They're not really designers. They could never compete with the French. Well, why would they come here? And then all of a sudden, because of this conflict of thinking, it became, oh, really? Well, this is going to be a battle then.
Half of New York was on that plane. I mean, there were agents, editors, and models, and everybody was trying to study French in a minute. It was like the most beautiful exhaustion you could ever imagine.
It was very exciting to be going, no doubt. Look, I didn't complain a lot. I was just a good kid from Bedford-Stuyvesant, and I was just happy to be there. I was like, and I had a job to do.
So this was supposed to be a way for the American designers to go to Paris to show their designs. Princess Grace is there, and Josephine Baker, who lived in Paris at the time, and the Rothschilds are there. I mean, this is like the richest of the rich. The French, of course, went first because, you know, they've got home court advantage. And the show was long, and the show was boring, over 2.5 hours. I'm surprised that people were still there when the Americans finally got their chance to show.
The French show wasn't traditional. The French show was like the Ed Sullivan show. It was a variety show. They thought that's what we were gonna do, and we did just the opposite.
From the moment the show started, the American designers understood that this was a show. They gave you Broadway.
Girls are floating through and moving, and they're moving in such ways, you know?
We were marching ahead with full steam, our music, our attitude, our blackness. All the girls were dressed in Hulst and Oscar, Stephen, a woman designer, Anne Klein, and Stephen Burroughs, a black designer, on the stage at Versailles. How colorful can you get? The girls that he had in his section were like so different because they were black models from 7th Avenue who really knew how to move to the music.
The black models brought the fireworks to the runway. This was the first time that European designers and the European press had seen black models all together.
When I went down that runway, I was so defiant because I knew they looked at us as, shh, no way. And at this point, I'm just, you know, determined to win. We walked with the train that Stephen had on each dress, but when we got to the very end, I threw the train down and stood there in such defiance that it became a photo. And when I did that, you started hearing the stomping. And then all of a sudden, all the white programs started going up in the air, and they started screaming, "Bravo, bravo!" And we knew we had this.
It really became this legendary moment that also set the scene for American designers to also need to now work with black models.
The most important thing about what occurred at the Battle of Versailles was that it opened the door wider for the black model in Europe, and it never closed. One of the preeminent models to emerge from the Battle of Versailles was Bethann Hardison, an iconoclast who would redefine what it meant to be a black model in America.
I'm still tough, don't you ever forget that.
Bethann Hardison is a role model.
She is an icon.
When it comes to black models, Bethann is a force. Most of these girls who are successful today owe it to her.
We would not be where we are without her today.
She has been an activist from day one and has always known and spoke for all models that are not white.
I think I need more white people like myself who think like I do, to not be afraid to speak up and say, you know, I'm sorry, we need to have some, let's change some of this, because it happens in my industry.
She has just created a path in fashion for conversations that, you know, were before their time.
God, if we had a queen of models, an ambassador, the leader, that's how I see Bethann.
While I was a latchkey kid in Brooklyn growing up, I was independent. I grew up in the garment business, and I was sales girl in the showroom before I even was discovered to be a model. And Willie Smith was the person who used to see me in the garment business, and he was the one who asked someone to find out who I was. When I came along, I was the first one that came along that looked different. I was skinny, short hair, black, boy-like. I didn't really fit into the normal mold. Like Bill Blass could never figure out he couldn't use me.
One of my favorite stories in fashion is that Bethann Hardison, the entire time that she was a model, always had like a second job.
I worked with Stephen Burroughs. I was in the showrooms. And then I also started overseeing the design studio, making sure he had everything that was needed for the design studio.
You know, she didn't believe that modeling was gonna make her enough money to live the way she wanted to live.
For me, I'm a working girl who so happens to model. That's a little different.
That work ethic accelerated her rise in the fashion world, and right around the corner was the arrival of another model, and together they would change fashion forever. 5 favorite models.
Number 1, Iman Bowie.
The queen.
The queen.
Iman.
Iman, obviously.
Iman. I love Iman. I will always respect Iman. Iman is phenomenal.
Iman's arrival on the fashion scene in the 70s was a real turning point for non-European models because she was African. She had that incredibly majestic appearance. People sort of appreciated the African beauty, essentially.
Iman burst onto the pages of American Vogue and other publications at a time when it was even more, I think, conservative than when Naomi first started to work.
Iman occupied this space that sort of rose above not just other black models, but rose above white models.
She was the zenith of those shows. She was the opening, she was the closing moment. You know, like, this is the kind of thing these models bought.
You don't forget someone like Iman, not only because of her beauty, but also the fact that she has this one name, and she's unique in itself in many ways. She was a star.
Before I came to the United States, I have never heard of the modeling industry. Never seen a fashion magazine, never wore makeup. This was completely a foreign endeavor on me. In 1969, there was a revolution in Somalia, and I became a refugee. I stayed in Nairobi because I wanted to attend the Nairobi University. And then one day, this white gentleman just came and started talking to me. He said, "My name is Peter Beard." And then he said to me, "You know, have you ever been photographed?" So I kept on walking because I thought maybe he was trying to pick me up. So I was very, hesitant. He said, "I will pay you." And I stopped and I said, "Well, how much?" He said, "Well, how much do you want?" I said $8,000 because that was the number for a tuition for 1 year at the university. And he said, "Okay." So we met the next day and he took pictures of me and he paid the tuition. I think they're some of the most compelling photographs that I've taken all these years.
Iman, only 20, and today one of New York's top models. But a few short months ago, she was a simple Somali tribeswoman, herding cattle in the bush.
Before I came to the United States, there was a journalist called Eugenia Shepard, wrote a whole-page article in the New York Post by just seeing a picture of me and interviewing Peter Beard. In that article, Peter creates this mythology. He discovered me herding cattle. I didn't speak a word of English, he said, although I speak 5 languages. I speak English, Italian, French, Arabic, Somali, Swahili. And he called me the most beautiful woman that he'd ever seen. Now, a lot of people have said since then, oh, that was sexist, that was racist. I've always said I have never found Peter Beard to be sexist or racist. I was in on the secret, so to speak. So it was not like I was a bystander who didn't know what was going on. People started talking in front of me about me because they thought that I did not speak English. And then one day, Stephen Burrows, black designer, invited me to come to his showroom. So I went there, models were there. They started talking in front of me. Everybody said, "Well, she's not as beautiful as they said she is. Well, she's not as tall as they said she is. Well, do you think she's a princess or is she a good herder? Which one do you think she is?" And I pretended, of course, I didn't understand what they were saying. And then so Stephen came, gave me the dress, gave me heels. I put on the dress, and for the life of me, I could not put the heels on.
And I noticed she was trembling so much. So I went over to her and bent down to help her foot into the shoe.
And all the girls in the room, they said, oh, don't do Bethann that. Now she's going to be thinking that we have to bow to her and, and do this for her. And Bethann didn't pay any attention to them.
And something told me she spoke English and looked up at her and said, you understand everything they're saying? And she looked at me and she said, yes. And that was our bond.
And she became my closest friend from that day till today. We've been through everything. She's been the maid of honor of my wedding. She is the godmother of my daughter. We've been through divorces, businesses, you name it, we've been through it together. As a model, my image is my currency. So I have to look good in pictures. Makeup has always been an issue for Black models. I remember the first shoot, when it came to my turn, the makeup artist asked me a perplexing question. He said, did you bring your own foundation? So I was like, no. And he proceeded to mix products and applied it to my face. And when I finally looked at the mirror, I looked gray. I was not a chocolate brown girl anymore. I looked gray. But when I finished that job, I went to every store and picked every foundation, mixed product, and I took it to the job every day. And before makeup starts, I give it to them, my foundation, and they'll apply it to me. To the point that every time I went to runway shows, all the Black models who knew about my package, they'll come to me.
This is not inclusive. This is not inclusive. This is not inclusive. You cannot justify these being the darkest shade.
A Black model should not have to go get colors of makeup that work for her before she goes to a job.
All these big brands that have been catering to women this whole time, they didn't really think to cater to us. But I want to wear foundation too.
Many white brands court us because it's a dollar sign, it's a trend. And it's nice, but it doesn't really have the DNA that it needs.
I would never leave the house again without my own foundation in my bag.
Even in shows where I've gone to a makeup artist and she looks at me and she's like, do you have your color? And I'm like, what year are we in? And second of all, you are the makeup artist. You should be well prepared.
That's the difficulty of being a Black girl in the business.
Revlon created a line of cosmetics called the Polished Ambers. And it was the worst makeup because they had no intention of creating a line for Black women. It was a lesson of what not to do. Creating a makeup for women with skin of color. I don't think it even lasted more than a couple of years. And that was the first time the seed of creating Iman Cosmetics was planted in my head.
You know, you have to understand what it is like to go and buy a brand that was created by a Black woman. You were proud to pull it out. The shades, affirmed you. They made you feel good. That was groundbreaking.
People don't really think about how successful she is as an entrepreneur with her clothing and her makeup line. She's someone who's absolutely conquered the business.
Here's the thing that's so important about Iman. Iman was not only a mentor to models in America, Iman became an ambassador for Africa. There wasn't a lot of knowledge about what people who were really African looked like. If you have to have an ambassador for your race, for your continent, it should definitely be Iman. One of her lasting legacies is the number of African models who have followed in her footsteps over the past 40 years. And one of the finest examples is Halima Aden.
Halima interview, take 1, ABC common marker.
My name is Halima Aden. I was born and raised for the first 7 years of my life in Kakuma, one of the largest refugee camps in the world. When I was about 7, my family resettled in America. And I'm not gonna lie, living in Minnesota was a huge culture shock for me. My family was among the very first families in St. Cloud, Minnesota. It has the nickname White Cloud because, as you can imagine, there was a lot of people who weren't ready to see the change.
But Iman, she gave me so much hope to fight through it, and it made the days that were hard, especially at school when I would get teased about wearing the hijab, being Somalia. People would literally call us smellians. Kids were brutal. And so I would have her to like go back to and be like, you know what? No, my country is not gonna be known for what's happening today. I never really saw myself going into fashion, but I felt like I had a responsibility to be a good role model.
Aden made history in 2016 when she wore a burkini and a hijab during the Miss Minnesota USA pageant.
The next year, she became the first hijab-wearing model to sign with IMG Models.
For me, I'm so lucky that when I did start my modeling career, it was already in a time where people were celebrating Black beauty, celebrating diversity, celebrating inclusivity. But at the same time, I was always the only hijab-wearing model, you know, on set or on the runway even. It doesn't feel good. But I will say I'm so grateful that I did it, because what happened was, just like for Iman, it opened the doors for others to step on the scene. And then for the first time, they're like, whew, you know, I don't have to compromise my hijab. I will be welcomed just the way I am.
It's like a relay, you know, like one person, you know, runs one leg of the race, then, you know, you pass the baton and another person runs the leg.
Passing the torch and opening the door and lighting the candles and keeping it there.
For Black models, the idea of having a tribe, it's quite very important for me.
Having other Black models around was literally a sorority, a sisterhood.
Being models of color, you always connect in some way.
Someone said to me, who's gonna do what you do when you're gone? And I could only think, since there's no one I could hand this baton to, I could only think, it's you. I'm handing it to all of you. I appreciate you very much. Thank you.
As the 70s ended and the 80s started, a new era of empowerment for Black models began. It was that moment when the world cared about fashion.
You felt fashion on the streets in New York. You know, there was like the influx of like the supermodels.
It was all about the clothes, the model, the show.
As Black girls, it was exploding.
And there you have Naomi,